Today's guest, Belinda Ryan, is fascinated by people, their stories, and how our experiences impact our lives. As a leading art therapist, counselor, lecturer, and director of Ignite Art Therapies, Belle is passionate about the power of using creativity to problem solve, reflect, inspire, and motivate. Most recently, Belle's focus has been on providing a safe space for leaders to consider how they can best lead for the greater good. She believes that we all need a space to be real and acknowledge our experiences so that we can break through our barriers and realize true success, abundance, confidence, freedom, and purpose. Belle, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to see where our conversation goes today.
Me too, me too. Now, we bonded over our love of art therapy, and one of the things that we connected on was the fact that art therapy isn't a paint and sip session where you create something pretty, and even though that's fun, art therapy is really about releasing emotion. Do you find you still need to explain that to clients and groups at the beginning of a session?
Definitely. I think one of the things that as a society, we sort of, when we hear the word art, we think of things having to look good and be that rather than what it brings in the moment. And one of the things I love about the art therapy space in particular is that it's able to put words to things that we can't necessarily find the words for or want to talk about and that type of thing. So I'm constantly trying to explain it, but it's one of those things that is really hard to explain because you need to experience it and be in the moment, and it's not cookie cutter. So it's really hard to describe what somebody does in a session, or when I go into organizations and do workshops. It's really hard to describe what we do because it's so dependent on the moment and the interaction that people have with the art. But yeah, paint and sip, while it's fun, it's connection, it's that type of thing, it's certainly not what I do.
Yes, I agree. Art therapy is a really great way to go deeper and to go beyond the cognitive. In your opinion, how do you know that is what's happening when you're facilitating?
I trust the art has it. And I trust that the person or people that I'm working with, they know what to do. So we all have inner resources, like things that are inside us that we don't realize are there. So, and we're often looking elsewhere for something. And so what I love is that the art therapy process or the art helps you express. You may not know what you're doing or why you're doing it, but there is something being held there through a shape, a line, a color, a texture, the way something's put together, the metaphor and symbolism that plays out in the moment, all really important parts of this. And that's where it naturally goes from our cognitive mind, our thinking mind, into what is this experience and what do I need to explore right now. So that's what I love about that aspect of it too.
Are you explaining to people what the colors mean and what they're connected to on an emotional level when they're going through the art therapy, or are you really just leaving them to it to stay focused on themselves and their own thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things I think that we quite often as a society want is the answers, and this means this, and this is like, there's a lion here, so it means this. And, we want meaning, and we're meaning making people. But the way that I work is allowing people to have the experience for themselves and do that. And then I ask questions about it for us to explore. So, for instance, something like someone's done something in red, that could mean 5,000 different things. It's not for me to say what it means for you. It's about you to discover that for yourself. Because one day red might be I'm angry. The next day it might be that it's love. So it's about in this moment, right now, this is what the person's experience is. And we're just having an explore. We're being curious. We're seeing what's there. Some things might have meaning, some things don't. But sometimes there'll be an emotive reaction to something where it's like, oh, there might be some information here. Let's have a look at that further and more closely. But yeah, I'm certainly not interpreting. It is about what is happening for you in the moment. What I see in the image can often be about me. So it is, that's why we don't interpret separate, and we just have a look and see what's there and be really curious, because that's where the insight happens, and the possibilities and the unknown becoming known, because that's what we're aiming to do. Is like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what's happening. And then the art helps us find it.
Yes, the art helps us find it. With your sessions, because they're in a group setting, is there a resistance to letting go?
Yeah, so one of the first things I do so often the group setting is in organisation. So I'm very aware that people don't want to reveal their soul on the table like they would with me one-on-one and in a more of a coaching sort of session. So it's about the context that we're in and why we're there and what we're trying to achieve. So quite often in the organisation workshops, it is around checking in with how you are. What are your strategies? And how do you have optimal well-being? Because what we know is that in order for us to be productive, enjoy work, have a great positive culture in an organisation, it comes back to us and our own well-being. And so, yeah, it's that thing of, it's one thing that I'm very mindful of is, what setting am I in? What's the aim here? How do I keep people safe as well? But also, the resistance is quite often just because in everyone's mind they're not very good at art. And it's like, actually, you don't need to be. This is great. I ran a workshop this morning with 120 people in an organisation, and we did scribbles, like literally scribbled. And that was amazing. And what the insight and what they got from that was incredible. But yeah, some of the resistance is, I don't want to reveal something about myself. You always have choice in the art therapy process as far as how far you go, what you reveal, what you share.
Yes.
But also, yeah, people's year 3 teacher might be in their ear going, "You're not very good at art." So it's it's an interesting mix. But I think anything that feels different and unique, or I don't know where I'm going and what's going to happen here, can be a bit scary to people sometimes. And so it's about trusting themselves and trusting that I've got it and I'm going to hold this for you, and we're going to just have an explore and see what happens.
Yes, I love that. I remember last year I ran an art therapy workshop for one of the charities that I was on the board for, and there were teens who were challenged with mental health issues. So it was quite fitting for us to paint and play and so forth. But I got them to paint on big sheets of paper, and I was getting them to paint with their hands. So they all had rubber gloves on, and they were moving the paint around. So I was getting them to draw out all of their emotions and all of their feelings out through their arms, down through their hands, and just move the color across the page and just really get it moving. Anyway, they were all getting well into it. And at the end, because they were releasing all their junk, I asked them, and they didn't know this was coming, I asked them to tear the paper in half and in bits and put it in the bin. And the resistance, some went straight to the bin, some had already ripped it without me even asking, which was amazing. But there were a couple of people in the group who were feeling very challenged by letting it go. And it's amazing how we hold on to the old stories, isn't it? Where we are attached to the pain programs, we're attached to the things that are harming our well-being. And instead of being joyful about that release and that feeling, that want for the respite, there are some who need that little bit of extra help and a little bit of coaching to let go. And those people, I was being really cheeky because they're teens, so I could be a bit more playful rather than professional.
Yeah.
But I was playful, and I was like, why do you want to hold on to that shit? Like, this is your opportunity to let it go. And slowly but surely they all released it. Some took a little bit longer than others, but it fascinates me that people don't really want to let go of their junk. And so I love that you're going into corporates, because one, you're asking them to acknowledge their own wellness, and number two, it's actually releasing and cleaning it up and taking that responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that I quite often talk about is, and one of the reasons why I work with adults mainly, is because we've got a lot of stuff we're carrying around with us, and it becomes familiar and a friend. And when we actually, like, if we think about the baggage that we're holding, some of it's not even ours, but somehow we're carrying it with us. But also some of it needs to change, but we're too scared to have it change. And how do we lighten the load, and what does that sort of happen? So, like your example of people not wanting to rip it and release it, there's some information there, and so it's about that process. But I love finger painting, and I'm no gloves unless a client wants to.
Yeah.
But also that's the metaphor playing out in the moment, because when you think about paint and literally touching it, you are spreading it. It is, you're in your body, you're flowing, and what we know about trauma is it's held in the body. So we're releasing it through that. It's flowing, it's doing all these things, rather than going, what would be the alternative? Oh, let's have a lesson on this, and let's sit in our head, and let's have a framework, and let's have a model, and here's some information that I will talk at you with. Instead, and you're laughing at that, instead it's, let's be in the experience and see what happens, and release it and let go and shift it and move it and change it in a safe way. So we're
Yes.
not dragging up everything, but it's metaphorically there. And what it does is help people express beyond what they could imagine. And you don't have to talk about it.
No, you
Finger
definitely don't
painting,
have to
ripping it
talk
up,
about
it
it.
all says something. I love a good rip of paper, I can tell you that. So that's the thing is, it's about us. We all have life that we are carrying with us, whether it's messaging from our family, from friends, from society, the highlight reel, all of that stuff, we're carrying that with us. And so it's so amazing to sit with people and go, okay, what are we going to do with this? And let's express it and have a look at that. Whether it's a more lighter workplace wellbeing, let's look at your self-care strategies, or it's the really intense, I've had some big stuff happen and I need to work through that. It all sits there together in the art.
Absolutely. I know from personal experience, painting and art therapy specifically has provided me with really unique ways to see the things that have been challenging me, and it creates unique perspectives. Do you personally use art therapy for your business and moving through things on a strategic level?
Yes. So I've had a few business coaches and, been part of goals clubs and things like that. And it hasn't worked for me because it's too cognitive.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, I need to get the colour paper out and work it out, and find the strategy in a different way. So that's what I love, is that it can work on lots of different levels. Like, it can be that more planning, let's see what happens scenario. And at the end of that, it's like, okay, I've got my steps now. I've just gone through this artistic, creative process to find that. It just looks very different. So the last thing I resonate with when I'm doing planning is, now follow the steps and here's a chart that you need to fill in. It's just not my personality. I
Yes.
need to draw in different colors and have arrows going across the page, and there's a symbol that sits here and does that. So it's just the way that my brain operates and works. But I guess that's the thing. It's saying that we can use art therapy in so many different ways, and the creative process. So for instance, if I'm stuck on something, whether it's business, personal, whatever it is, I will go to the art to try and find a solution. I will paint, or sometimes I love using colour piece of paper and putting pieces together and ripping things up and doing that process. And what that does is allow me to get clear, because the art provides insight. And then I'm like, oh, I've got the answer. I know what it is. Yeah. But it's allowing it to evolve. So for instance, the other day I did a planning process, and it started out that I was a little bit frustrated with something. I couldn't quite reach what I needed to reach and do what I needed to do. So it was a real, like, pushing away from my body, did some art, and then I just instinctively knew I needed to bring something else in. And it was using different pieces of colour paper and tissue paper and things like that. I love the metaphor of fire. So it started out as a fire, but then it ended up looking like a crown. And then I was like, oh, that's right. I'm trying to do all these other things, but I need to just focus on what my thing is.
Yeah.
And so it was really good, because it was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm getting distracted. And fire, for me, my business is called Ignite Wellbeing Co. That metaphor of yeah, shine your light, do this, let's go and focus on what you need to do. So I wasn't consciously thinking that that's where we'd end up, but that's what the process did. So it is that planning. I'm stuck on something, I need answers. It's problem solving. It's so many different things that sit there together. And I do that for myself as well as hold the space for other people and organisations.
Yes, and I love that. I figured that you would. I couldn't have imagined that you were just doing and facilitating this for everyone else and not you. And I love the fire metaphor. I'm very connected to the fire element as well. But it signifies so many things. It signifies creativity. It signifies passion. It signifies a light within you that is burning up so that you're your full expression. And
Yeah.
that symbolism in and of itself, and then the fact that it turned into a crown is about you being in your personal power, which I love so
Mm.
much. I mean, that's how you know that you've come back into your body, you've anchored back out of the mind into the heart space, and you're ready to step forward again, out of that. Because when I'm painting, it's usually because I've hit a wall somewhere emotionally, physically, or whatever it is. And so I'll just start painting, and all of a sudden hours go past because I'm layering on top of layers on top of layers on top of layers, and I have the inspired thoughts start to flow through without me even trying. All the things, all the questions that I've got, all the things that I haven't been able to see in my mind's eye, all of that starts to open up, and then I can go back and get into action mode, if you will. And
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I would think that you would feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely. And I probably don't do it as much as I would like to do.
Me too,
But
me
I
too.
remember when you were talking then, I was just thinking about I studied counselling and then did a transpersonal counselling course. And this is before I did art therapy. And I never forget, I was processing all this stuff. There was lots of layers happening. But I would just instinctively, like one day I just went to the shop and bought all this paint stuff and just needed to paint. It was like something needed to come out of me as well. So yeah, it just reminded me of that sense of we have all this stuff inside us and it needs to have a voice. And that's what the art can do in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And it needs a voice, it needs to be expressed, and it needs to be acknowledged without judgment as well. Because when
Yes.
you're painting, it's very easy to start judging what's coming through and what it looks like. Sometimes it can be
Mm.
a brown and black blob for the most part, and then all of a sudden something magical comes out of it. And that's what happens when you're going through those emotional cycles as well. Like that, it teaches you a lot about how you're working through your emotional equilibrium, because you're observing. The key is to observe it rather than judge it, and just let it be whatever it's going to be, and trust that it will end and it'll finish when it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I notice with clients as well as just observe the world a little bit is that we're in this sort of zone where we need to have all the answers and it needs to be perfect and we need to be on this. And we've lost our sense of curiosity and to see how things evolve. We need to know the end point. And it's like we miss the process in that. And that's what the art therapy, it's the process that is the most important part of this. And it's like, let's see what happens. And what do we see and how does that feel and what's happening in this experience that then is insightful for your life. Yeah, so it's not just about getting the perfect art. It's never about the product. It's about what happens in the moment. And sometimes the mistakes, in inverted commas, are actually where the gold is. It's the muck,
Absolutely.
it's the stuff that went not planned and all of that stuff that really can become where the gold is. That's where the light is and where attention needs to go. So that's what's amazing about it. And that's what I love about it after all these years. I've been working in this space for about 20 years. It still amazes me. I'm like, wow, isn't it amazing that that accidental fingerprint on that thing becomes really significant in the context of this picture, which then becomes significant about your life? Like, that's amazing.
It is
Yeah.
amazing. There's one artwork that I created as part of my last collection, and almost all of my artworks are paintings on top of paintings on top of paintings. And everything for me is about texture, because I'm very much about how do things feel. So, what does the environment feel like? What is the things I'm digesting feel like? What am I feeling? All of those things. And so texture is very important. But there was one that I painted, and in the middle, it looked like, when I finished it, in the middle, it looked like two sort of sections, if you will, and they looked like lungs that had been burnt for the most part, right? They were black and they had burnt, but I had sprinkled gold all through it. So it looked like through the shadow and the darkness of my grief, all this magic was coming through. And it was beyond all of my expectations. Like, it was absolutely stunning. And I went to bed and I woke up in the morning and the gold had immersed itself into all the like the shadow, if you will. Energetically, it was now the gold was in the shadow. And so I had to, for aesthetic purposes, because I was selling that artwork, I put the gold back on top. I had to redo another layer of the gold. But even that, the symbolism of, even with the shadow, even with the darkest parts, the things that you don't really want to face, even the hidden aspects, there is magic to be found there. And it might be that you need a couple of attempts at it. So, one art therapy session may not do the trick. You may need a few attempts at it to get it to where it needs to be. But that's also symbolic of how you support yourself too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a quick fix all the time. And you think about gold going into the darkness, that might need a few layers and things like that. But also you think about the lungs, and that's about breath and all of that sort of thing, and life, and you could have so much meaning in that as well. So yeah, it's about that processing, and yeah, this needs a bit more work, or we need time with this, we need it to dry, we need all of these things to sort of happen within that. And that's where the really insightful, powerful stuff is, because it's taking time to look and
Yes.
see and experience and feel. And I love the way that you talked about the feeling of it, because quite often we ignore our felt sense of
Yes.
things. Our mind will go, oh no, this is the logical thing, let's be rational, it can't be that. But our body and our whole being is saying something else to us. And so that's what I love about the experience of creativity and working in this way, is that we're actually looking at all of that. It's, how do I feel my way through this, not think my way through this?
Yes. And
So
also,
that's sort of some of the cool stuff.
yeah, and also incorporating the play. Like, let's
Yes.
play our way through these blocks. Let's play our way through that icky stuff feeling. Let's play with a full stop at the end.
Yeah, definitely. And I sometimes, like, people are dealing with some big stuff in our sessions, or yeah, and it's like it can look really fun. Like, say for instance, I had an organisation that had a bit of conflict and lots of high staff turnover. So I knew that there was potentially going to be some big conversations and elephants in the room that needed to be called out. So they all walk in, like, it's a law firm, and they all walk in their suits, and I was like, and they all laughed at all the art stuff sitting there. And I said to them, okay, now let's get into teams, and I want you to create something that represents the organisation. So there was a train that was off its tracks, and none of the carriages were connected to each other. There was a bridge that was falling down. There was a garden that was trying to survive, and there was a house on fire. So they described their organisation. It was fun and playful. In actual fact, the receptionist opened the doors and said, can you be quiet? I can't hear on the phone. But we were able to have a really serious conversation around your organisation is described as a house on fire.
Yeah.
And then we were able to go, well, what are the techniques? Like, where are the firemen? How did the fires start? Why are there all the spot fires? We're able to talk about things that you can't. If we talked about that in the real world, like the logistics of it, it would have ended in conflict, defensiveness, barriers would have come up, all of that. But what we're able to do is cut through that. It's fun, it's playful, we're making stuff, we're getting in our bodies, we're doing all this stuff, and we're able to have these serious conversations at the same time. And so
Absolutely.
that's what I love about that, is the play can actually cut through and allow some really serious stuff to be explored, expressed, talked about. looked at as well, but it's safe because it's in symbolism and metaphor
That's
as well.
right. And that's something that you do so well, is you create a safety for your clients to have that expression and to share and to release. And I mean, we met at a networking event and you were even doing that then. I was like, oh, this lady right here, I opened up to you within like a millisecond, and it was beautiful. And there needs to be more people like you. But the fact that you can do that when these businesses are in such a critical place, and there is so much angst and anxiety and desperation and fear and but you're able to get them to see the humor in the chaos, because that's a really good way of disarming all of that fear, and then working together as a team to acknowledge it, and then going, okay, well, what is my part in this? What part did I
Yes.
play in that train coming off its tracks? What part did
Yeah.
I
And
play? Yeah.
that was certainly part of the process as well. It's like, what am I doing as an individual, as a team, and an organization to help this, to fix this, and to move through it and shift it and prevent it happening again? So, yeah, thank you about saying. I think sometimes I have an energy of you can tell me anything and I'm not going to be shocked or surprised, or a bit of a let's cut to the chase and get real about things, which I think is really good. I love when people just share with me, and yeah, we get to it. So
Well, that
it's
was
good.
that was definitely us. I was just
Yeah.
blathering on. But I did. You do have a beautiful energy, and it's easy for people to surrender, how they're feeling to you, and it's so beautiful and so gentle. And of course, it's one thing to be able to do that one-on-one, but to be able to do that with a group, and especially a corporate group who are not, spiritually inclined, they're not creative. Typically, they're very in the mind, very academic focused. So to get them to surrender, that takes a specific skill, and it is an art in and of itself to be able to do that with people. And yeah, like I said, you do it so well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is the key to that is I will go into an organisation and I know what the outcome needs to be and what we're aiming for, but I don't plan it fully. I wait and see how it feels and what's needed in the room, because ultimately, whether you're a lawyer, an accountant, a theatre producer, or whatever you are, you're still a human being. So that's what I think it strips back to, is like, I'm just dealing with people here and everyone wants to be seen and heard
Yes.
and acknowledged and understood. That is our need, and our human interactions all come back to that. And so I think one of the great things that I thank the art for, and the creative process, or I don't know, it can be pipe cleaners and pop sticks or whatever it is that allows people to be seen and heard. I'm holding the space for that and have the container for that. But no matter what is happening, people aren't being talked at. They are actually interacting with their own experiences. And so it immediately disarms them, because it's coming back to, what is this for me? How am I able to be seen and heard in this? And whether it's a room at a conference where there's 400 people in the room, or there's 10 people who I can be really more personal with, the art holds that. It allows people to go, how am I? And what am I actually thinking about this? And how am I really? What do I show the world, and what is actually happening internally? Because that can be very different. And
Yes.
it's actually going, yeah, this is what's happening for me. And then we move to, well, what do we do with that?
I mean, it's certainly a different way to reflect and connect to what you need to do in order to live the life that you want. But why do leaders, in your opinion, why do leaders need to experience this and get their teams being more creative in this way now more than ever?
Because we spend so much time in our head that it blocks the possibilities.
Yeah.
It boxes everything in. And so when you think about, there's like design thinking and things like that, to me, that just seems like obvious. So why wouldn't you do it that way? Because what it's doing is, if we use creativity and think about doing things differently, it produces new perspectives and possibilities that You can't just think about, you need time to brew on things. It's the group think, it's the collective that can bring amazing things. And I think as leaders, and I think about people who are CEOs and people in senior management, there is so much compliance and you need to do this, and then there's the wages, and there's like managing people, and there's so many different things. But if we can bring creativity into it, it can bring a different perspective and a different lens, and then allow new things to emerge, or thinking there might be a better way to do something. But we don't know that because we're so stuck in the way that we've already always done it, or my thinking brain can only produce so much stuff. And so it's about the potential of what else could be. And having said that, we don't not think when we're creative. Like, we still come back to, what does this mean? What actions do I need to take? All of those sort of planning and goal setting and all that stuff is all within it as well. So I think it's just, I would really love for people to embrace this a lot more, so that they can be free of having to think through things all the time and hold on to things. And the potential and possibilities that something like a creative process can bring for people is refreshing. In actual fact, the client that I just saw, we talked about the refreshing aspect of their old self versus embracing who they are now, and how refreshing that is.
Of course. Yeah. For me, it's all of that. And the fact that you're getting people to go back into the heart space rather than in the mind. The mind has no business being there when it comes to leading and connecting. When you're managing a group of people, you need to lead from the heart if you're going to inspire, if you're really truly wanting to create change there, if you're wanting them to perform at their best, they need to feel that you are driven by the heart, not the mind. So
that's human connection.
That's right. And it changes the language that you use when you're in the heart space, because you can still, I was a high performing leader, but that's because I was always in the heart. And that it was kind of like my secret weapon, if you will, because no one else was really operating that way. And consistently for years and years, I was winning awards across the board and irritating a lot of people as a result, but it was good for me. But that's because I genuinely cared about the people I was leading, and I wanted them to know as much as I could while I was, healing all my own things at the time. I wanted them to know that I was in the trenches with them. I cared about their well-being. I was fighting for them at every turn, because the environment that I was in was very turbulent. The KPIs were changing what felt like every minute of the day. Their rosters were being changed with like 2 days notice, which was not HR approved, but they were doing it anyway. And it was like, just comply. And it was breaking my heart, because these people had families and they knew that I knew it was terrible. And I didn't sugarcoat it. I was just coming back to, what do they need from me from the feel place? What do they need? They didn't need the words like, but this is what corporate have said, and, blah, blah, blah. And, the standard tone.
They wanted to be acknowledged.
Yeah, they actually needed to know that I understood this was a problem, and they needed to know that I was in there willing to deal with it. And the only way to do that is by being in your heart. You can't think your way through that. You can't be mechanical. And when you're so overwhelmed and you're so stressed and you're so tired, it's really easy to step into just action mode, just tasks.
Yeah.
And, you just want people to do what you want them to do, because it feels too hard taking that time to connect in that way. But the best part is that by taking some time to bring your group together to do something creative, to bring them to that point of surrender, that's the beginning of a very good foundation. And it helps to get everyone back on track. And it gives people a way to express their frustration and get it out, rather than them harboring it and it's sitting in that, all that angst over and over and over, and then letting it bubble and bubble until they snap or they burn out or whatever it is that, is happening now, which is all of those things.
Yes.
I think it's critical, but reminding them to drop into the heart space, I think is the other big piece.
Yeah, definitely. And that sense of we need to do, but actually we need to be sometimes. And
Yes.
it's about what's actually happening here between us and how do we connect through that and what happens. And yeah, the word disease just kept coming up, you know, that dis-ease and the uncertainty and all of that stuff when people don't know what's happening and don't feel like they are connected with, can really put people in a place that's not that positive, as well as we need to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And it's human to human, it's heart to heart. It's, you know, without it necessarily being big, deep and meaningful, it can be really simplistic and heartfelt in as far as I see you. Here you are, I'm holding space for you. And that's what I get the honor of doing in, you know, particularly in my one-on-one things, is I'm literally holding the space for you to do what you need to do. And I think every day we can do that for others as well. So yeah, hats off to you for bringing the heart to leadership as well, particularly when you can't always control some of the circumstances that are happening around it, but you can also make people feel a lot better because you've seen them.
Yeah, and look, you know, at the beginning stages of my leadership career, I was young and I had a lot to prove. I had a chip on my shoulder. I was out there, you know, with in the full fire mode, burning everyone and anything to a crisp, you know, and I learned very quickly that that was not going to sustain me, and I certainly wasn't going to create longevity for myself behaving like that. And it was a growth thing. I was early 20s, for crying out loud. So of course, you know, at 24 I thought, you know, I can rule the world, you know, very much in that space. But over time, and it wasn't long when I realized, hey, I'm not getting the relationships and the feedback that I really need. I can't move these people, I can't move this mountain like this. And so I let myself, because we were working so intensely together and we were doing shift work as well, it created an opportunity for me that I didn't even realize. And so naturally, I just started doing it, and we got very, very close, and we were like a family. We were treating each other like that. And there was definitely some dysfunction in there that you had to manage through like a parent. But for the most part, we were together, and we were together no matter what was happening. And that, it made it easier for them to come and spend 8 hours. You know, I was working at a telco at the time. It made it easy for those people to come and sit at a desk and answer phones over and over and over again, you know, and be on time
Because they
restrictions
weren't.
and all of those things.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about that whole aspect of being talked at rather than with. And it sounds like that shift was really positive
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
I'm with you rather than at you.
Yeah, but I think senior leaders and CEOs especially need to do more of that. And I feel like, as a way of protecting themselves, there is a mask that is put on, almost like a little bit of a performance that goes on. But your people know that's not what's real. And they need to feel, this is my message to the CEOs and senior leaders out there, they need to feel who you are. If you want more from them, if you're going to make that change, if you're going to revolutionize the way that the workforce is operating, they need to know where your heart is and why you're choosing to do the things that you're choosing to do. You know, there's no way that can happen without that. And, you know, we're getting information overload all the time. Everyone's on their phones all the time, social media and so forth. The connection needs to be with the heart so that they pay attention, because that's the out of the ordinary to me.
And one of the great things about, well, there was lots of things that were really hard about COVID, but one of the things that actually really assisted, and I think sometimes the gap between management and the team, was that it's like, we don't know what's happening. And they communicated that, like, we're working it out, it's going to happen. But that showed a vulnerability and a sense of humanness and
Yes.
realness
Yes.
that came through. And what's been really fascinating to watch, particularly in the leadership space, is that sense of being vulnerable, sharing more of yourself, not just being about the information that needs to happen and the tasks. It's about who are you as a person, and sharing some of that stuff that's tough in
And
your life.
that's
Or
right.
they're celebrating the great things as well. And that comes down to, I'm a human being and share part of my heart with you.
Absolutely. And that's important from a recruitment perspective as well, because I've seen that when people are applying for jobs, even when they're being thrown way more money than what that job really should be, you know, paid at, they're still not accepting those roles because they can't connect with the people that are interviewing them and the organization, because there's not enough about who they are on a human level to encourage that connection. So someone who is communicating in that way, when you've got senior leaders who are interviewing, sharing their own experience about why they're in that business and so forth, they're choosing those roles over the ones who are throwing them the money, because at the end of the day, that doesn't really mean anything now these days.
No.
I mean, it's good, it'd be great, but it's not everything.
No, we're not robots.
No.
We're humans, and I think what's really fascinating about the generation coming through is that they need those other things
Yes.
from a job and from a role as well. And maybe we've been conditioned a little bit out of that, but it's really awesome to see what's coming through. And it is about, actually, we're so connected through social media, technology, all that thing, but we're so disconnected as well. And so I think that's what we're seeking, is connection in a different way. That's why talking circles have become such a big thing, or there's lots of ways for people to connect in different ways, but also at work, it's what's needed. I don't come to work just to do a job. I come to be a human being and have an experience. And when you work in a toxic culture workplace, it's horrendous. And I work with a lot of people who it takes years to recover from that. So, I think that's why I'm passionate about this workplace explorations, is because, we spend so much time there. It has such an influence on who we are as people and how we live our life, whether it's working too hard, too little, or everything in between, that we need to experience that in a really positive, fulfilling way, and it have meaning, rather than it just being about you're a good accountant and you can do all the numbers.
Yes. And being creative is a really great tool to make that connection. If you're feeling a bit challenged to be vulnerable, you can use creative tools to help facilitate that with you and the team. So you don't have to just be out there on your own being vulnerable and sharing, but you can actually use the creative aspects to let your guard down and join in with your people.
Yeah, definitely. It's even something as simple as, quite often at the beginning of a workshop, I will use picture cards because I want to know who's in the room. And so it's like, just choose a card to introduce yourself. So that's pretty open. They can choose whatever they like. And what's been fascinating in that, people have worked together for years and have found out things from each other, about each other, in that intro thing, which is basically to set the scene for the workshop and for me to get an idea of who's here. And isn't that amazing? Because that's what a picture can do. It says 1,000 words and people can project into it and talk about a different aspect of themselves through this process. And I think that's a really cool thing.
It is very cool. And again, it's a beautiful gift for them to have that experience, and even just pause for a minute or an hour or however long it is to acknowledge, hey, I thought that I knew everything about what was going on in this workplace. Maybe I don't. Maybe there's some other perspectives that I need to start thinking about. And maybe I need to put myself in that other person's, shoes and look at it from their point of view, which they might not have been doing as gracefully outside of that, because it's easy when you're the one on the receiving end of some not great things. You don't really, in those moments when you're frustrated and you got your cranky face on, you don't really want to look at it from the other person's perspective. But in those scenarios, you can come together in a number of different ways. And it doesn't even need to be a workplace issue. It might be dynamics within the team. It might be someone in the team is going through, and we're seeing this, terrible health issues, and that's having an impact and stressing out the team. So even using creativity to work through the feelings, is just another opportunity. I mean, the list is endless for the things that you can do with the creative side of things.
Yeah, one of the reasons why it works, and there are so many possibilities with how we could use creativity to help people through things, is because it's external to us. So when you create something, it's out of you. You can see it differently. It mirrors something back to you. And it's not only the symbolism and metaphor that is safe, but it's the fact that you're talking about the art and the creativity and what you've created that then reflects something back. And that's where it is so powerful, because it can be used in so many different ways, whether it's conflict, well-being, planning, strategic stuff, values, all of that sort of stuff can do it. But it's so safe because it's outside of you, and then it's reflecting things back and you can see it differently. And it's really important to have new perspectives on things and see things from a different angle and work through things in that sort of way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I am so grateful for the work that you're doing with the corporates and individuals. Obviously, it is so necessary. And if I could put you in every workplace, I would. That's my wish, that more corporates spend more time investing in, instead of more workshops and more thinking things, they need to start incorporating more feeling things and getting people back into their body, out of the mind, and letting them release some of the angst, some of the stresses that they're feeling within the workplace. And as we know, people bring their personal stuff in, whether we like it or not, they are. And using creativity in that way is a good way for them to erode any of those unnecessary blocks and give their staff and their people time to be compassionate and to give them some respite, which is so needed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're in a really exciting phase where people are more aware. And yes, I'd love to go into every corporate place and help them with this too. But yeah, I think wellbeing. So for instance, this morning I did a workshop for an organisation that is a global organisation with 19,000 employees. And across the globe today, they all did wellbeing workshops.
Wow.
Which is incredible and very insightful organisation and progressive as far as looking after their staff. And apparently it's really hard to get a job there because they retain their staff because they look after their staff in so many different ways.
Of course. I mean, I haven't heard anything like that. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing. And one of the people were talking about the fact of, we don't hire just on qualifications as a certain type of person who needs to fit this organisation, and they live their values like I've never seen before. I'm so impressed. I very rarely get fangirly, but I'm like, oh, this organisation's amazing. So anyway, I'm going to ponder and consider what that means and why have they created it like that. But I know that they know the importance of looking after humans in amongst it. And all of my dealings with them has been absolutely incredible. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we can do as a society, and we're moving forward together to know the importance of human connection.
Yes. I absolutely love that. So, Belle, I'm going to be sharing your information across the socials and with this podcast post. How can the audience connect with you?
So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and it's Belle Ryan, just BEL. Belle Ryan. My organisation is called Ignite Wellbeing Co. So it's ignitewellbeing.com.au, and that's the handle on Instagram as well. So probably the easiest thing is either LinkedIn, go through the website and sort of connect with me that way. But I love creating things for organisations, but also holding space for individuals to look at their life and really discover their own potential and the possibilities of unpacking some of that baggage, giving it back to some people and discovering what needs to be in that bag for yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I've absolutely loved talking to you about art therapy and about human connection, and also what leaders can do out there. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Maryanne. I've really enjoyed it. And we can talk, can't we?
Running out of conversation was never going to happen with the two of us.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
See you soon.